It was just incredible. And today I want to talk a little bit further about the heart of Stockamp. And I want to talk about it in the sense of what I think one of our most important missions and important goals is as an organization, but beyond that as people. And that is a mission to help others and improve the lives of others. And I have to tell you that I am extraordinarily nervous today and may get emotional because it's a topic I get very passionate about. And when you think about the impact that we can make and improve on people, it's incredible. But what makes me nervous today is I'm going to talk about some things that I really haven't talked about before. Talk a little bit about my personal giving and some of the activities that we're involved in. I'm going to talk about my faith. You've heard me do that before. And I'm going to talk about and challenge the organization and people individually to think about your own giving. Now, on the list of taboo topics that you're supposed to talk about, I guess I will avoid politics and that other topic. But that's one of the things that makes me a little bit nervous in this presentation, so bear with me as we go through this. We certainly know that in the work that we do as an organization, we improve the lives of everybody that we encounter. Think about it. You know that the work that you do with the employees of a hospital and their staff enables them and makes them better people. It's part of our guiding principles. We have as our guiding principles to increase the capabilities of the people, to increase the synergy of the organization, to enable the people to do a better job. Just that poem that we saw from Care New England yesterday was representative of that. And we know that when we work with an organization, we also improve the patient experience. We improve the quality of care. We improve the value that that patient gets and the treatment that they get from the organization. We know that when we work with hospitals, that we enable them to be better positioned to serve as the healthcare provider to their entire community. So we have a dramatic impact by strengthening the performance of the hospitals on their whole community. We also know that we enable them to be a better employer, a stronger employer, which provides jobs and opportunities. We improve the lives of everybody that interacts with them. We also know that as we've been blessed as a company, and Paul has shared yesterday in terms of the results of the community service projects, things we're going to hear about in a little bit this morning, that is a way that we give back and further improve people's life, and everybody that's been involved in those has certainly been deeply touched by that. I like to believe that we also improve the life of anybody who ever comes through this organization and works with this organization. Certainly our goal is to create fulfilling career opportunities for our people, and people as they spend the time and the years here certainly have experienced that. They've been blessed with that, with opportunities, with economic opportunities. That's a blessing to their family and all the activities and people that are important to them. But I also believe that we want to be, and we have been, a blessing on even the people that are passing through and pass through rather quickly. Maybe the people that work here for a couple of years go on to medical school, or work here and go on to some other activity in life, that we've been a blessing to them and we've improved their life as well. That is a big goal and an objective, and I think that is really what the heart of Stockamp is. But there's another aspect that I want to talk about today, and that is I want to share some activities that really, I think, even further broaden how we are going about improving the lives of people and giving people hope out there and providing that. And it really deals with an imperative. It's not necessarily a business imperative. And this is what's very different about my presentation today, is I'm not going to talk about our business strategies. I'm not going to talk about our growth strategies or what we're doing or how we're going to sustain and be the #1 professional services firm in healthcare, but I'm going to talk about what I think is an even more important imperative for all of us, certainly collectively as a company, but also individually. And that is, to whom much is given, much is expected. And we have certainly been given much. If you sit in this room today, you have been given an enormous talent, capabilities, abilities. You wouldn't be in here otherwise if you weren't in the top 10% of performance as you went through your academics and you wouldn't be successful if you didn't have those capabilities. But beyond that, you've been given incredible talent and an ability to earn money and to raise money and support yourself, your families. We've been given such vast wealth. In a world where 2 billion people earn and live and eke out an existence on $2 or less per day, we're fortunate to live on a continent, North America, where despite only having 6% of the population, we have 34% of the wealth. $2,200, if you have assets of $2,200, you are in the top 50% in terms of wealth in the world. If you have assets of $61,000, and these are all numbers according to the UN and the World Bank, if you have assets of $61,000, that puts you in the top 10% of the wealth in the world. And the question is, what do we do with those assets? And what are we going to do to help improve the lives of other people and give them hope? This is a topic I've never talked about before, and that is what's happening on the personal giving side, what's happening with the foundation that was established 8 years ago. I've been reluctant to talk about that, and that is because I was raised biblically that giving was to be done anonymously. The one hand does not know what the other hand is doing. That when you give secretly, and you get your reward from your Father in heaven and not from man below. So why do I talk about it today, and why do I feel it's important? I talk about it for 3 reasons today, and these are my 3 objectives. 1, I want you to be blessed with the knowledge, as I've been blessed, especially as we accumulated some of these statistics. I want you to be blessed with the knowledge of what the success of this organization is helping enable to happen and changing the lives of countless people, thousands of people in the states, around the country, around the world, in terms of what you're helping to enable. Secondly, I hope that what we can share possibly is some ideas, some techniques, some concepts that maybe allows you with an organization that you're working with in terms of a not-for-profit organization or a charitable organization, maybe apply those in whatever capacity, whether you're serving as a volunteer, whether you're serving as a board member, whether you're a donor, to help them advance and grow in their mission. And thirdly, I hope to really have you think about the giving that you're doing now and the giving that you might do in the future. Some introductions. People thought maybe I wouldn't get around to introductions. I have a lot of guests at these tables in front. And want to introduce, it's Take Your Family to Work Day. I never get these chances with board meetings and those kinds of things that I go into. And we have the first associate here with the company from 17 years ago, and that is my wife, Gail. And we also have, at that time when the company started, Lindsay was just a baby, and now she's off to college next year. And then our son, Matthew, who's a freshman in high school, and Mark, who's a 7th grader. Would you please stand, family? I also have my brother Dave here and his wife Celia, and no, I didn't bring Dave here to see if he could fake out the new people in the company and have them approach him and say, "Hi, Dale," as he was at the door earlier. Maybe that worked with some of them. But they have been just wonderful supporters over the years of everything we're doing, and the best way that they've done that with their prayers. They are in constant prayer for this organization, down to the specific business issue, down to the meeting, down to names of people in this room, praying as we've had challenging times, good times, and all that, and I'm glad to have them here. Also have a number of people from Mission Increase, which is the foundation that I'll be talking about a little bit more, that we've had going on for 8 years, led by Dave Farquhar, our executive director, and I'll be introducing Ron Post and others, and a couple of the organizations that we're involved with in Portland, and I'll be giving more introductions as we go through that process as well. A few facts. I don't have a lot of slides today, but a few facts. I probably should have put them up as fun facts. Did you know that the success of this company and your contribution to that in terms of either your project effort or for whatever aspect, has provided the funding that allowed an organization in Portland that deals with at-risk youth to see and treat and help and heal many, many more people than they otherwise ever could have. Now, what do I mean by at-risk youth? I'm talking about the kind of people that society considers disposable, castaways, like a 14-year-old girl who was thrown out of her house at age 9 by her parents. By 14, she was a drug addict, she was pregnant, and had tried to commit suicide several times. And this organization turned her life around. Did you know that an organization that treats, I told you I'd get emotional, that an organization that treats abused women from violence, domestic abuse, has been able to increase their impact and see 400 women a year grow to over 1,000, and that they are now able to go into other states with that model? Did you know that an organization that gives hope to people in Africa by providing cooking supplies, propane stoves, other things to provide for sanitary food conditions, is now able to serve not just 8,000 people a year, but 75,000 people a year? Did you know that the work that's being done by an organization on an Indian reservation that's giving hope to youth through better education where alcoholism is rampant is now not just on one Indian reservation, but they're on 12 Indian reservations? That an organization that provides disaster and relief to India, the poorest areas of India, that used to be serving 20,000 people a year are now serving 90,000 people a year, and another disaster relief organization will send out in the next 4 years more supplies, more medical teams, help more people than they did in their first 26 years of history. Did you know that in the last 8 years, the success of our organization and what we've enabled has helped an organization start called Mission Increase Foundation? And what they've been able to do is grow beyond just a Portland office to now have operations throughout the West Coast, over into Colorado, Denver, down to Mexico, and that they are training and working with 500 ministries, 500 not-for-profit organizations, enabling them, and in the course of 2 or 3 years, literally doubling, tripling, and quadrupling their income to serve more people. And that the reach of those partners is dramatic. That they're spread around the country, delivering direct services, helping people, helping the poor, helping the hurting, helping the needy, giving them hope. And that it's not only that, but that there's a global impact of these organizations that are really all over the world in terms of their impact. That's what your contribution, that's what your success has allowed. I in no way want my talk this morning or presentation to be focused on anything that I've done. It's not that. I'm just trying to be a faithful steward with the resources that the Lord has provided. It's been the collective efforts of everyone here, everybody that's contributed, particularly the people that have been here a long period of time and seen the success of the company over the years. But not only that, we could not do that if we did not have the incredible capabilities of the people within Mission Increase that designed and developed programs and teaching and training, something that I want to talk to you more about today. But even Mission Increase wouldn't be successful if we didn't have those 500 partners. Those organizations with a big heart that sees a need in their community, sees people hurting, sees people sick, and wants to help them. And we couldn't be successful if they didn't attract even more donors. So if anything, I want to emphasize that this is a massive collective team effort and that everybody ought to feel pretty incredible about this. Now, one disclaimer here. I am going to share and talk about my faith. And I know that that can make people nervous. And as I've said before, I am not trying to impose my faith on anybody here. We all have our different beliefs. We all have our different faiths. But one thing you cannot deny, and that is that when you give and when you help, and you've seen it in our community service projects, nothing makes you feel better than that in terms of your contribution and your help, because that's what we're created for. I really try to live by life, and I'm just awed by what God has planned when I look at Ephesians 2:10. When it talks about that we were created in Christ Jesus to do good works and to help our fellow man. And the neatest thing about that is these were preordained. They were determined for us in advance. Somehow, God knew years ago that I'd start this company and that He'd bless it and we'd be successful and have resources. And then He put into it the other people that came into our lives, Ron Post, as I'll be talking about, and others that have been able to help through Mission Increase accomplish this. It doesn't happen by accident. It's not a coincidence. So I'm going to be sharing that because you've got to understand my faith. But again, I'm not trying to impose my faith on you. So how did this all start? I had little idea that when I went to the breakfast table on a Saturday morning in 1999, that I would read something in the paper that day that would fundamentally change the way I viewed a lot of things. It would fundamentally alter and change the way I viewed, and Gail and I viewed, our giving. It's not that we hadn't given before. We were both raised in a way and in Christian homes, and we learned the value and the joy of serving and giving from a very young age. Even with our babysitting money, lawn mowing money, we learned that very young. And we had steadily been stepping up our giving over the years and into our adult years. But it would fundamentally change the way that morning would change the way thought about giving, thought about the proportion of giving, thought about savings, thought about even things like the length of time that I might work. Because my originally plan would have been, by this age, to have been on the beach. And I'm not talking about the beach that we talk about, beach time when we're on the side, but I mean the beach. That's where I plan to be at this point in time. But something in the newspaper that day altered all of that. And I don't know why. Obviously, the Lord took me to that part of the paper, because usually my journey through the paper in the morning is throw all the rest of it away, go straight to the sports section. In fact, I wish they made newspapers that were just sports sections. Devour that, maybe take a quick look at the weather, and that's it. That day, I happened to, for whatever reason, be thumbing through the paper and came across this headline. And this headline read, Foundation gives record $23 million away that year. And it was a well-known organization, well-respected foundation. And the competition started coming in, like has always come in, I guess, throughout my life, whether it's sports or business or competing against the biggest consulting companies of the world. Because I remember being challenged by that and thinking at that point in time, Lord, I want to make that kind of impact in giving. I want to know that when the dust settles in the future, I've been able to make that kind of impact and help people through that process. And we talked about it, and I remember praying with Gail about this as well. And it wasn't only that, as long as we're setting aggressive bars, given that we didn't have resources to give those levels of finances away, let's double it and then round it a little bit. $50 million. That was the goal I had. That was what we wanted to accomplish in terms of impact on giving. That when the dust settled on some year in the future, that the result of what we had done and what we had done with the resources that were given would be $50 million or more sometime in the future. We'll report today how we're doing against that goal. There's a problem, though, and that was looking in the paper a little bit further. I saw that that organization had an asset base of $475 million. That was a problem, because I know the Lord has blessed us in many ways, many more important ways than economically, but we didn't see how the Lord was ever going to bless us with that kind of level of resources. And no, he hasn't provided. Everybody's seen the revenue levels, and we know we've got a company to operate and that kind of thing. He hasn't provided those kinds of means. So what it meant is we would have to operate in a very different way, a strategic way in terms of how we allocate and use our resources and how we multiply those resources and greatly leverage from people talent and capabilities and multiply efforts that way. Now, about the same time, there was another big change that would come together and help formulate what became Mission Increase. And that was our good friend Ron Post was making some transitions in his life. Has anybody in this room heard of Northwest Medical Teams International? That's something to be proud about. Ron and Dave and Dan and others who are Northwest Medical Teams, look at all of that, people that have heard of that. Northwest Medical Teams International was founded by just a great friend of ours, now grandfather to our kids, and just wonderful mentor, and that's Ron Post. And Ron Post founded Northwest Medical Teams by getting off his couch when he was watching TV and seeing the killing fields going on in Cambodia and the bodies strewn across the fields. And he said, he was a successful businessman, he didn't have to do that. He said, we need to do something about that. And within weeks, just a few weeks, he had a team on a plane, donated, I think, by one of the major companies, and with medical supplies and teams, and sent, and he made a difference in people's lives. He saved people from dying. He gave them hope. And he took that organization and he helped establish the foundation along with Dave Farquhar, who we're blessed to have as our executive director, and Dan Davis and Chris and others. He took that organization and grew it to now where it raises over $100 million a year of gifts in kind and cash donations to help people in disaster relief all over the world. Highly regarded. In fact, in 2003, Forbes magazine ranked it as one of the top 10 charities in the entire United States. Well, Ron was making a transition in his time, and we got to talking about what we might be able to do. Now, bear in mind, this was not my timing. I had this plan, I had this dream, but remember, the operative word was someday in the future. Someday we'll have a $50 million impact when I have more time. I have a busy day job right now. And so the timing wasn't mine, but it was certainly the Lord's timing, because Ron became available at that point in time. And we dreamed and we visioned on how we might be able to establish an organization that could help give hope to more people. But first, by helping and giving hope to the reaching arms and the reaching hands of the different not-for-profit organizations and ministries that would directly give the work. Now, before we talk about our model and how it works, it's important to understand a little bit first the mindset of what's going on in the not-for-profit world. And when I talk about a ministry today, I don't mean a church-affiliated organization per se. A ministry is someone that may be working with the homeless or the inner city or drug addicts, but if I use that word, that's in the context that I'm working with. Here's what you've got in the environment with many organizations today. And we're talking about the small to moderate-sized charitable organization. We're talking about people with budgets of, say, $100,000 to maybe $500,000 or even $1 million a year. We're not talking about the American Red Cross or Salvation Army or United Way or organizations like that, but we're talking about organizations that are smaller, up to maybe $1 million of annual income budget. Still a pretty sizable amount. What you've got is you've got organizations that are founded by someone with an incredible heart and an incredible vision. You're going to hear from two of them today how the heart that they have and the passion that they go about doing their work with. And these organizations see a real need in the community, and they go at great personal risk to meet and serve and help the poor and the hurting and the needy. They do it in the sense of economic risk that they take. They don't work with drug addicts and do turnaround in the homeless for the income that they're going to make. They put their family at risk in terms of their livelihood. They also often take great personal risk especially people that go overseas to some of the areas of the world that are very dangerous to be in, or people working in the inner city with addicts. But they have a purpose, they have a mission, they want to serve, they want to help, they want to make a difference, they want to give people hope. Now, coupled with this, you have to have an organization that is an ongoing entity in terms of bringing in the funds, bringing in the incomes, having time to develop strategy, develop administrative programs, your computer sites, your donor communications. And often this individual does not have necessarily either the interest in doing that, and even if they had the interest, they might not have the time to do that, and they're not large enough to have the staff to do that, or sometimes maybe they don't have the capabilities or the abilities to do that. So what happens is, and one other point, they usually don't get a great deal of help from their boards. The governance boards in many of these organizations, and I'm not talking about after they've developed over the long time, isn't really involved as much on a strategic basis or helping resource or plan allocation. In fact, in his book, Good to Great, Jim Collins talks about especially not-profits, and he says the problem with the not-for-profits is they're in need of greater, much greater discipline. And he starts with talking about governance and the board and vision and resource allocation. So they're often not helped by an active, strategic type of board. And so what the end result of all of this is it's a constant, with their organization, it's a constant hand-to-mouth existence. It's a constant struggle to have the time to deliver the service, deliver the help, design and administer and give the programs, and on the other side, you're having to constantly be raising funds and raising income so that you can support the current programs and that you can hopefully even grow the organization. And what tends to happen is that is a real burnout aspect, a real detractor from the mission. And often if they do have donors or supporters throughout that process, they go back to the same donors again and again and again until it kind of gets to be a worn-out welcome. And it gets to be a real tough time. And they're constantly hand-to-mouth existence and struggling to really advance the ministry forward, resulting in a lot of discouragement, disillusionment, abandonment. Certainly not organizations that are vibrant and growing and serving the needs of many people whose needs have to be served. So that's the backdrop of what the organizations looked like in terms of what the current environment is for many modest-sized organizations. Now, when Ron and I were talking about this and kind of designing the program, again, we were never going to have $475 million asset base to work with, so we knew we needed to leverage, and we needed to leverage people in a very different way. The thought and the concept was anybody that's worth their weight ought to be able to raise 10, 20, 30-fold, many multiples of what you pay them in terms of their salary. So let's take advantage of human talent and human capability in terms of what they're able to do. We'd also need to be able to leverage every dollar of our finances, every dollar of our resources, our technology to get leverage and a return from those organizations. It was going to have to be different than a typical type of foundation. We'd have to approach the work that people did in a different way. When we worked with organizations, the focus was going to be on working with organizations and teaching a man how to fish, not giving him a fish. And that is the model with many foundations. Not necessarily wrong, it's just their model. And again, bear in mind that that model has a foundation that continuously has a large asset base so they can kind of continue on in that process. But the model here had to be, if we were going to achieve the objectives that we had, the model here had to be, we'd have to be able to teach a man how to fish and not just give him a grant and give him a fish. In fact, he'd have to learn to fish pretty fast because we would work with an organization. The plan and the vision was to work with an organization for 2, maybe 3 years, totally transform the culture of that organization, so that they are now an organization with a much broader vision that would be able to sustain and improve that performance over the long term. We would fundamentally change the culture from the board level down all the way through down to the detail person working at the individual desk level of the organization. They'd probably become more proactive, timely, and effective in the process. A lot of similarities with the business that we do. But that was the model that it would have to be. I tell you that one of the things that is the scariest part about our model is we also had one other big belief. And that was, and we never would be able to accomplish the objective we had if we didn't have this aspect. But Ron and I both believed in John 9:4, where it talks about the Lord is talking to say, as long as it is day, we must do the work of the one who sent me, for the night is coming when no one can work. Now, Jesus was talking at that point in time about sharing the news of Jesus and the love and bringing people to salvation in that. I often apply that to the giving side of things and the charity world. There's people hurting and dying and sick and need hope today. So you can't just sit back and rest on the resources you have. You've got to put them to work today. So one of the biggest aspects of our foundation, and I have to tell you it's the scariest aspect, is the fact that we do not build and accumulate resources. We give it all away every year. That's really scary, and it tests your faith, because every year you have to have the ability to regenerate, especially as we get to a larger organization and spread around the country every year. It challenges that. Now, the types of organizations, I've already told you the size of the organizations we've worked with. $250,000 a year, maybe sometimes even a little smaller, up to $1 million a year. The kinds of organizations we work with really cover a broad sector across the charitable organizations. We work with a lot of homeless organizations, providing food and shelter to people. We work with a lot of organizations focused on addictions, drug addictions, especially people that have failed kind of the last resort. They've been through 3 or 4 other programs, a lot of federal programs, and work to turn them around. We work with a lot of women's assistance in terms of abuse and domestic violence and unwanted pregnancies with young teens. We work with a lot of community development where we're investing in education, investing in maybe buildings or infrastructure to help that community, whether it be domestically or internationally, support itself. That's the sign of a vibrant, healthy community, is can they support themselves? And we work with a lot of those types of programs. A lot of work that we do with disaster relief organizations where you send supplies and medical teams out to different disasters around the world, be it Katrina, be it anywhere in the world that there's a catastrophe or a problem in the world. We work with a lot of those types of organizations. And a lot of programs focusing on disadvantaged youth. I gave you an example earlier of one, but these are the youth that are the orphans, they're the latchkey kids, they're the kids on the streets that are really subject to some real potential challenges and difficulties. As I said, it's the ones that life considers castaways, or society does. That's just a sampling, but in the 500 or so organizations, there's many, many more. And how we go about working with an organization is it starts out with what do you think it would start out with? If there was a similarity to our company in terms of how you'd start to work with an organization, it starts out with an opportunity assessment. And we have developed some rather sophisticated software. The guys have been incredibly innovative in this area to where we're able to get the financial statements and get all the aspects and donor tracking and other indications, strategy documents, and we're able to assess very efficiently how that organization is going to do. We couple that with doing cultural assessment of the environment. Is this an environment that we think we could be successful in? Is their board bought into this process? Do they have the right kind of vision? Do they have the right kind of strategy? How can we help them? That's how we start working with an organization in terms of doing an assessment. And bear in mind that most organizations, when they come to you, they have in mind that they really want a grant. That's really what they're looking for right off the bat, is some funding, because that's the traditional foundation model. We take them through a different process. The second way we work with the organization, and this is where we've historically focused and started, and now we're doing a little bit of a shift in that, is one-on-one consulting with organizations. Again, remember, we need the power of leverage. We need to be able to impact that giving of the organization, double, triple, quadruple it, not by giving large dollar grants per se. We do a number of grants. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But we need to leverage the people. So we do one-on-one training and teaching and working with that charitable organization. And we teach them in developing a strategy, developing a broader vision, a communication strategy with donors, governance and board development and training the board. Even things like teaching them how to design a website that would attract and retain donors, how to work with the internet in terms of using that as the option. We coach and teach and train them in many different areas. Now, historically, we've done that on more of a consulting type of one-on-one basis, but as we've grown to 500 organizations, we've known we can't do that one-on-one anymore. So we've formed workshops where literally 100+ people from dozens of organizations will come and receive training in many of these similar topics. 24 different topics, I think, is our workshop content. And it might be on governance strategy. It might be on how to develop the best fundraising plan or development efforts. And when I say development, it means a fundraising aspect in terms of the charitable world. How to develop all of those things. The neat thing about the workshops is it's kind of gotten to be a user group type of approach where people see others and they have a free exchange of ideas in that process, and been very valuable, and seeing us getting even better leverage than that one-on-one training. We also give organizations tools and technologies that have worked and methods. So if they're doing a fundraising event, be it a banquet, be it some kind of other activity, we give them a whole cookbook and techniques and tools and situation response guidelines for what do you do if you're right up to the time when your banquet starts and your key people pull out? How do you react to that? What do you do? How do you get advanced support? This is a very refreshing difference. I'm going to talk about similarities between our business and the business of the foundation in a couple minutes. This is one of the most refreshing aspects, and that is I live in a world on this side of my life that is open architecture, open software, open intellectual property, and I love it. On the one side of my life, we spend all of our time on the business side focused on how do we protect our intellectual property, what do we do, how do we guard against it, and on this side of my life, everything's open. In fact, I think our software is being translated into Spanish as we speak right now, and that's all the better. We want people to take it, use it, improve it, give it back to us, transfer it, because you know what? At the end of the day, more people are going to be blessed as a result of that. So that is a very fun side. We also couple this with strategic grants. So we do give funds. And some of our favorites are enabling technology, where we'll invest and spend and give people software and computers and ability to do donor tracking and the other things, or web designs, or work with them in that way. We love to hire a development officer or a grant writing officer, someone that maybe we pay their salary for a couple of years, teach and train in our concepts and techniques and methodologies, and then leave them and have them go and support themselves and the organization by the funds that they raise. And I also say we would invest in catalytic type of events. The opportunity, and you'll hear about a couple of these this morning, the opportunity to really invest maybe in some infrastructure that lets an organization grow even more dramatically than they could in that process. There's a lot of similarities between the work on this side of my life and the work on this side of my life. First of all, I never thought that there could be another industry more than healthcare or our company that would have even more acronyms. We've got them. We've got CRUTs, Charitable Remainder Unit Trusts. We've got DAFs, Donor Advisor Funds, and the dreaded TMDM, I think it is, Too Much Direct Mail. That's not a way you want to raise your funds. We've also got stratification as a similarity in the process. The most valuable thing you stratify your efforts around is the HCD and the HNW. Anybody got a guess of what that is? HCD is the high capacity donor. HNW is the high net worth individual. You absolutely stratify your efforts and your programs around that, just like we stratify our efforts around high dollar accounts or other conditions that we work in our patient flow world. There's a lot of other similarities too. Whoops. How do I advance this forward? There we go. We got quotes In fact, we've got a quote fest competition going. You think we've got a lot as a company. I think we're over 1,000 quotes now. Well, I think we're at 1,100 in the foundation. We got a contest going on. We got quotes and we got testimonials. And you might wonder, why do you need quotes? What are you marketing? You're giving a service away. You're asking people to come and get training and money. Why do you need to market that? More about that in a little bit, why that's so important. But we got a little bit of a competition. In fact, when we finished our great new quote book, I took it back to the Mission Increase folks and said, let's do something like this. And of course, now what comes with that is probably a price that doesn't necessarily fit the not-for-profit world side of it, but we're developing in that area. One thing that transfers across all industries is skepticism. Here's a person that wanted basically a grant up front. We said, no, but we're going to deny your grant request, but we'll give you training instead. It's nice to see that we're not the only industry where people are skeptical. Here's someone that said, I've been burned by consultants in the past who overpromise and underdeliver. Boy, it sounds like the work we routinely follow up on. But they were transformed as a result of that training. Or a board member who thought at the worst they'd waste an hour of their day. We try to deliver proven methods and solutions. And this is a quote from someone. And we're really proud. What we're trying to replicate in the Mission Increase world is we're trying to replicate that same excellence that we have in our side of the world and be a leader in this field and really change an entire industry in terms of how people run not-for-profits and foundations. Here's something that talks about how we provide the leading techniques and proven methods so people aren't left reinventing the wheel. Great leverage in doing that. We like to believe that we're on the leading edge of innovation. We get feedback that talks about this, and it's talking about the cutting edge of not-profit thinking or revolutionary ways for not-profits to think, and that we understand the e-climate and how to help someone navigate through that process. We strive for training excellence and always exceeding expectations, just like we do as a company, and love to get the feedback about how the training exceeded expectations, that the level of professionalism was equivalent to what this person saw with his 10 years as a trainer at Cigna Healthcare. One of the best seminars, and I really love the last one that talks about a real beacon of light, because that's what we want to be. We want to enable, we want to work with these organizations to improve their organization, to be a beacon of light, a source of hope, because they're doing the more important work even, and that is serving the end person who needs that hope and needs that help. We obviously transform the culture. We can't have sustainability if we don't do that. And this talks about transforming the ministry of the organization. Totally changed an organization from being in survival mode to being in the offensive mode. Talked about before the training and the teaching and the changes that were made that their board was more reactive, just watching the organization. Now they're actively involved in helping set the strategic direction. But the biggest results, and the thing that we're really proud about, is the sustainable results. That's what the model is all about. Through the training, through the teaching, through strategic, catalytic types of grants, sometimes not even that large of grants, we wanted to have an impact on these organizations. We wanted to work with them, teach them to fish, and then leave the organization. And these are just some examples of organizations that maybe started, boy, 25,000, that wasn't really an organization. That was a good idea that someone had and maybe working on it on a part-time basis. And that organization's now been transformed to someone that's raising over $300,000 a year. Organizations like were budgets of $400,000, now going to over $1 million and $2 million, and sustaining that. We form a long-term partnership with these organizations. When they work with us, if they want to get the training, if they want to get the tools, they need to report back their income, the number of people served, their strategies, where they're going. Kind of like getting the track reports into our office on a weekly basis. We're constantly monitoring and reporting on how they're doing. And this is just a sampling. Know that there's 500 such stories going on today, and that work is going on because of the good work that we've done as a company, the success that's providing the funding to be able to do that. I want to feel good in that. Please feel good in that. I want you to hear, though, the personal stories of two ministries that have been profoundly affected by the work that has been done, by the model and applied, and how they have used that, and that has given them hope. And I'm going to introduce them both at this time. One will follow the other. But Kathy Weiss is just a great example. Come on up, Kathy. Kathy is the executive director of an organization called My Father's House. Kathy has worked for 28 years in the social work field with organizations like the Salvation Army, the YMCA, and others. And she saw a real need in the Portland area dealing with how you help restore a homeless family and give them hope and rebuild their capabilities. She's going to be followed by Bill Russell. And Bill Russell has a fascinating background, very successful attorney, prosecutor, very successful. And he saw that society wasn't doing a good job with dealing with the homeless or transforming and healing addicts, that there was a constant recycling in and out of the judicial system with that, and they weren't doing a very good job of restoring. He left a very lucrative career, took a risk, and went to an organization called Union Gospel Mission, which has been around since 1927, serving and helping the homeless and giving them food, and helped design just an innovative program called Life Change. I want you to hear from both of them the work that they are both doing.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Well, My Father's House is a shelter for homeless families. And from the very beginning, we knew that we had a huge need in Multnomah County and the general Portland area, because as we investigated, we found out that in any given night, there are over 3,000 homeless families in our area. And to me, that was just absolutely devastating to think that there could be that many people, that many families. It's not just people, but families in our area that could be homeless. And so when we started, we thought, well, okay, let's just go for it. And we started working with families and really realized that in the Portland area, there's a huge need, not only just because of their families, but because a lot of the shelters would separate families. Men would go to one shelter and the women and children to another shelter. And a lot of the shelters wouldn't take children over the age of 10 for boys or 12 for girls. And so I would see families that were sleeping in their cars, or maybe part of their kids were one place and the rest of the family was another place. And the families were all over the city. And we thought, let's build a program that would take kids of all ages. What does a family look like? A mom and kids, a dad and kids, mom and dad and kids. How about a grandparent raising grandchildren? All of these were needs in the community that no one was meeting. And so we developed My Father's House, and we opened up a little building. This is the picture of the house, and we housed 5 families. And immediately we knew that this wasn't going to be big enough. One of our families, I love to tell a story about Angie, because Angie was a great example. Angie had 4 boys, and they were 15, 13, and then she had twins that were 9. She had been homeless for 18 months before coming to My Father's House. And what was interesting about Angie's situation is that she went what we call couch surfing, from home to home, friend to friend, family to family, until everybody was pretty much sick of helping Angie. And sometimes they would take the twins, but they'd say, oh, you know, the bigger boys are kind of an issue. And she would sleep in the park with her 2 older boys. She would sleep in bathrooms and gas stations. And she would find wherever she could for her and her 2 older boys to go, always worrying about the twins and where they were and what they were thinking and what they were going through when they weren't with the family. After 18 months of being homeless, Angie found My Father's House, and we had her move in. Angie was with us for 4 months. We're not a typical shelter that's only open 30 days. We take families for 4 to 6 months. And when Angie came to us, she hadn't worked. She hadn't been able to be in one place long enough to even get settled. She hadn't had her own home. She hadn't cooked a meal. She hadn't done any of those things. She had a lot of learning to do, some relearning. She had no confidence. And Angie was afraid to be on her own. She didn't know what she was going to do. She was hopeless and lost. And the boys were too. They had lost their interest in being a family. They just wanted this time to be over in their life. So Angie and the boys moved in, and it wasn't but 4 months later that we got a call, and one of the local agencies said, you know, we have an opening for a dishwasher at Courtyard Fountains, an assisted living care place. Do you have anyone that needs a job? And I said, okay, here you go, Angie, follow this one up. Angie went and she got that job as a dishwasher in a retirement home. Wasn't until about a month later she found housing. Somebody, one of our donors, called and said, you know, I have this house, I'm going to tear it down anyway. But we thought we'd wait about 6 months. Do you have somebody we could help? And so we sent Angie to meet the landlord. And she went there, and the landlord said, okay, it's only for 6 months. And Angie said, that's great. I'll get some rental history. Because that was another issue that a lot of homeless families have, is they've been evicted. So Angie came in, was all excited. She's got a place to live for 6 months. She has a new job. She's ready to go. So Angie and her kids moved into this house. And recently I talked to her boss, Mary, and Mary said, you know, I want you to know that Angie's an example. She's, to our entire staff, she's been given 3 promotions in that position. She's been there 3.5 years. And I went and visited her just a few months ago, and she's in that same little house they were going to tear down. It's their little house, and the landlady said, I just don't have the heart to ask her to leave. My condo can wait. And so she's been at her job for 3.5 years, and she's been in that home for just over 3 years. And I'm so proud of her, because what we were able to instill in her were the exact same things that Mission Increase instilled into our hearts, and that was confidence. When I began my father's house, I was a children's pastor at a church at the time, and I was like, I've got to do this. This is a great mission. We're going to do this. And I didn't know what I was doing, to be quite honest with you. But because of the training that I received at Mission Increase, we were on our way. I had a big dream. I didn't want to stop at this little tiny shelter holding 5 families. I wanted to be a much bigger program than that. And recently, we had a foundation come and look to give us a grant, and they toured our facility, including our new facility, the picture up there. And they said, you know, I was looking in your file, and 4 years ago you applied for a grant, and you didn't get it. And I said, no, I didn't. And he said, it says in your paperwork that you're someone with a big dream and a big vision that's unattainable. I do like challenges, but I'm glad I didn't know that at the time. But Mission Increase believed in my father's house. They taught me to be confident in asking for money. They taught me how to raise donors up in the community. That building is going to be open in April. It's debt-free, $2.7 million, and $2.1 million came from the community. And I am so thrilled that I've had the opportunity to be part of Mission Increase for the entire history, just 6 years with Mission Increase. And I am so grateful that it's because of the dream that they had that my dream has been fulfilled. Thank you.
One of the great privileges of working with Mission Increase is the crossbreeding that happened and the amount of love and respect I can develop for Kathy. I'm a naturally competitive and hostile individual. As Dale said, I was an attorney, and we collaborate about as well as sharks do. So it really has been a change in my life. In fact, when I first came to the mission in Portland in 1989, we were not collaborative. We were competitive and even hostile to the other works, and extremely defensive and not sharing information and very isolated. And one of the great changes that I can directly attest to Mission Increase is getting together and being part of a larger community of change agents. What I want to encourage you to do today in my brief time up here, and I forgot to tell Dale that brief means something totally different to a lawyer than it does to the rest of the people in the room. In my brief time, I do want to urge you to decide in your mind to become a change a change agent, an impact player. You're already an impactful person. Decide this morning that you want to expand that impact and think of how you can do it. Begin to embrace that as an individual. As Dale said, when I was a prosecutor, it was one of the most unchallenging things I've ever done in my life. If you think about it for a minute, you have paid professional witnesses and all the resources of the government going against a guy I saw named Mark. And Mark was brilliant, but Mark had no resources. All of his character witnesses couldn't be found or wouldn't be good on the witness stand or would be impeachable. He had the cards stacked against him. And as I did the sentencing, the pre-sentencing report. Now, most of my time as a prosecutor, I was doing juvenile crime and child protective work, crimes against women and children. But one day I had to fill in on sentencing court, and there was Mark. And the pre-sentence report was amazing. What happened to Dale when he read the paper that morning happened to me in court that day, where I saw a man who actually was so smart, he invented a kind of a straw while he was locked up in prison, and he sold the patent to that and made about $15,000. He was touted in guideposts as this great turnaround, brilliant inmate. And he got out and he spent every dime that he made on that invention using drugs. He was back in court. He was crying and he was begging the judge to send him back to prison where he's a somebody, where he could survive life, where he could escape drugs. I was asked right after that to run for prosecutor where I was at, and I had a career decision to make. I made a decision to go in a different direction because I wanted to impact people like Mark, and I've met many, many people on that road since I made that decision in 1983. So what we're talking about here is being change agents. What we're talking about here is connecting with people who need really deep help. They need some resources. And so I had a good decision, I think. I had a good heart, but I had a limited ability to do that. When I came to Portland, I came to put together a great product. I had been studying and looking at this problem of how do you become a change agent in the life of a heroin addict or a meth addict or a person who's a chronic alcoholic or using crack. I saw this morning people have been using crack for 20 years. How do you bring change into their life? I had a great product. But I had a limited ability to get resources behind that product and to, in a sense, roll out that product to people who needed the help. I had a big job ahead of me because there's only one of me, and right now there are 40,000 serious drug addicts and chronic alcoholics in Oregon who need help this morning. That's just in Oregon. I don't know where you're from, but you multiply it, it's a huge problem. So one, decide to be a change agent, and then you have to, and we call that at the mission in Life Change, take ownership. Take ownership of your decisions in your life. Number two, think ahead. You have to be adaptable to the changes that are happening. It's one of the core values and principles of this company that makes it great. Adapt to change, be ahead of the curve. And in homelessness in America, if you think of it, a lot of people still think of grandpa out on the street, some older alcoholic coming to a shelter, a mission. Well, you know, the face of homelessness changed drastically in the 1980s in this country. In Portland, we had for a century about 100 homeless people in the Old Town neighborhood of Portland where the mission is. We were on our knees. I got to tell you honestly, I like to pride myself. I think Kathy's a lot quicker to cry out for help. I'm a little bit more prideful and independent. But we had lost $40,000 a year in 96, 97, and 98. And finally, a change was made, and I became the leader in 98. And I thought, I don't know how to fund an organization. I don't know how to fund vision. I don't know how to grow. There's so much I don't know how to do that, you know, I just got down on my knees and I prayed out. And I cried out to God. And that day, while I was in prayer with a group of other leaders at the mission, Ron Post called. So we've been thinking about you, and we have some ideas about how to help. And that was the birthing, the seedbed of Mission Increase. And man, the help is substantial. This is our old building, old neighborhood, old people, old dynamic. I called it the crummy covenant. We'll give you a crummy meal and a crummy servant, and you keep living your crummy life. Here's some crummy clothes. You know, here's a crummy shelter. You can stay here for 7 crummy days. And then you can move into a crummy low-end flop house. I'm serious. That was the dynamic. And we thought, we want to bring about what? Change, life, vision, empowerment. I could see the potential in Mark Foster. I could see the potential in Patricia Socia, who got addicted to meth, had a meth boyfriend. Her meth boyfriend murdered her 2-year-old son. You want to talk about devastation. What do you do with that life? Do you just say, well, it was great potential, but it's too far gone? We'll see ya. A reporter down at the Eugene Register Guard, Diane Dietz, wrote an article about meth addicts. She said, this woman is the least likely to ever get off meth. The end of that article, she was getting on a Greyhound bus to come to Portland to go into Life Change. And I'll tell you, 6 years later, she's done with meth. She's working a fabulous outside job. She's been restored. She's got life in her. She's got hope in her. She's got a future. We don't want to throw people on the scrap heap because of their past mistakes. We want to see their potential, and we want to embrace it. But we needed serious help to do this. We wanted to change this old building into a new building, and the during is we had come into contact with Mission Increase, and they did 3 things for us. They inspired us, they equipped us, and they connected us. And that's what we needed. We needed to be inspired to be greater than what we thought we could be. This old building, we had the property, but we had no idea. I'm telling you, if we hadn't met Ron and Mission Increase, that building would still be sitting there like that, because just as Dale said, every day was overwhelming. We needed a force greater than ourselves, influence outside of ourselves to come alongside us. It was so great. And then we got into it, and we tore the building down. I was kind of like Cortez. We're going to burn our ships. We're going to go ahead. Why? Because we were inspired, but we weren't yet fully equipped. And the second thing is that Mission Increase not only inspires, it equips. We must have had, what, Dave, Ron, 300 meetings on the capital campaign with you guys about how to. And they didn't do it for us, but they helped teach us how to raise the funds necessary to complete the building. And we did it. We started it in August of 2001. A little thing called 9/11 happened the next month. But we kept after it. We were encouraged. They were strategic. They helped us leverage the gifts until we were able to build and open this brand new Life Change Center that, like Kathy, people looked at us and said, it's not possible. You're not going to do it. Your ambitions outstrip your abilities. But there it is, and now there are going to be 80 people who are coming off meth or heroin, living long-term, who are a force in our community. So I just have to say that I encourage you to not only be inspired and to be equipped, but connect to this kind of living. It's called generous living. And I agree with Dale. My wife and I often reflect on the decision we made back in 1983 to take the less traveled path and to live lives that are redemptive and impactful. And I can tell you to a certainty, it is by far the greatest way to live your life. If you need inspiration, go see Les Miserables again and see what kind of impact on a whole community of people one person and living redemptively can have. And thanks for the opportunity. I hope I didn't take brief and turn it into a legal concept rather than what you had in mind.